Hi, welcome to Watches Rated, where we methodically review the most exciting watches on a 100-point scale so that you can make the best informed decisions when purchasing your next watch. Our review process for each watch considers 4 primary criteria: design, construction, movement, and other factors. Each category is broken down into 5 subcategories, which allows us to precisely quantify what makes a good, great, or exceptional watch. Today, I'm reviewing one of my most recent purchases that I actually had my eye on for several years. Since this watch's debut in mid-2019, I knew that I needed to add it to my collection, but I wanted to purchase it at its source, in Japan. The opportunity finally presented itself in late 2023 when I visited my extended family in Japan. The Grand Seiko Heritage Taisetsu, which means winter, is an absolutely stunning watch. In true Grand Seiko fashion, everything about the watch, from the hands to the movement finishing, is breathtaking. The quality of craftsmanship is unmatched in this price range, largely due to Grand Seiko's obsession with perfecting a limited catalog of watches. Due to the exchange rate, discounts, and tax-free status, I was actually able to pick up this incredible watch for less than $5,000, which is well below the retail price in the US, which is around $6,600 at the time of writing. Every time I put on this watch, I play with the light reflecting over the intricate dial, and it's just simply perfect. If perfection was achievable in a watch, I think this Grand Seiko is as close as I've ever seen. The Taisetsu's main feature is obviously the textured dial, which I'll show you in a minute, and that's become Grand Seiko's signature design element. Designed to mimic a Japanese snow-covered landscape, the dial's texture is simultaneously subtle and arresting. While I own over 20 other watches, there's something emotional about this Grand Seiko. The way the light reflects off the dial is unlike any other watch, and sometimes I catch myself just staring at the dial as a smooth seconds hand glides peacefully over across the face. Before I end up playing with the dial's reflection in the light for the next 30 minutes, I want to jump into the full review, and I'll get to the unboxing shortly. After carefully considering all aspects of this watch, I ended up giving the Grand Seiko Taisetsu an overall score of 87 points out of 100, which is incredibly high for the modest price I paid for this watch. Breaking that down further, I gave the design of the watch 21.5 points. I gave 21.5 points for the construction as well, 23.5 points for the movement, and lastly 21 points for the various additional factors I consider. For just $6,600, or even cheaper overseas as I got it, you're getting a handmade watch that you can wear with a t-shirt or with a business suit. Beyond the intrinsic value of the watch, I think every watch collector now instantly recognizes a Grand Seiko when it's on your wrist, and it's certainly a fantastic conversation starter. And to summarize, between the unique spring drive movement and the even more unique dial, I think this Grand Seiko is an absolute must-have for any collection. So with that, let's get this unboxed and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. As you can see, Grand Seiko is really well made. The box and everything is just really, really simple yet elegant. This is exactly how it came to me from Japan when I first got it. It was a really cool experience overall. Here, I'll show you. Open this up. And there it is. The Grand Seiko Taisetsu Winter Edition, SBGA415. So to begin, I'll start by talking about the design of the case, which I gave 21.5 points out of 25 points. While I typically prefer watches in the 41mm to 44mm range due to my larger wrist size, as you can see, the Taisetsu's 40mm diameter case is the perfect size for this watch, actually. The watch sports a relatively thin 12.8mm thickness, and 2mm of that is actually the domed box sapphire crystal, and the lug-to-lug measurement is 46mm. So this really creates a compact feeling watch that feels proportional to its design. The overall dimensions and textured dial almost make the watch feel delicate, like some vintage pie pan Omegas, really. But the watch feels undeniably solid and up to modern standards because it's made out of grade 5 titanium. The lugs flow calmly from the case before ending at really abrupt, sharp edge corners that you can see here that are Zaratsu polished. They're just incredibly sharp, but they just really wear really well on the wrist. The case also features a continuous polished edge all the way along the side here, as you can see. And it just really demonstrates Grand Seiko's expert Zaratsu polishing capabilities that really no other watchmaker has been able to mimic. Getting to the dial, which is obviously, the most important part of this watch, as you can see here, the reflections are just incredible. It's hard to argue that this dial is not as close to perfect as any watch dial could get. Along with its sibling, the Shunbun, which has a pink cherry blossom inspired dial and silver second hand, the Taisetsu's machine press dial appears to mimic like a snowy field in Japan where the wind has swept unique patterns into the snow kind of left and right. The dial has a surprising number of different textures and colors. You can see here there's some silvery gray tones, there's some darker gray tones. It just doesn't seem like there's a distinct pattern, which is really part of the process of creating what really reflects a natural setting in a wind swept snowy plain of Japan. The indices are also expertly applied and diamond cut with micro lines on the top edges that you can see just really reflect the light really well. And they also show off their polished edges over here too that you really just see reflects light in just all different ways, more so than any regularly polished indices would. The hour and minute hands are typical Grand Seiko sword-like hands that have brushed tops and then razor-sharp polished edges that look like they can cut right through your hand if the sapphire crystal wasn't there for protection. The blue steeled seconds hand is actually my favorite part of this watch because it just adds a fantastic pop of color against the really stark, white and gray background. And I also like the raised black printing of the name, and the golden emblem too is really nice. I just really think it creates this impeccable feeling that, the indices and the Grand Seiko emblem are kind of sort of floating on top of the snowy field. Turning to the strap and the bracelet, as any collector I think will tell you, the Achilles heel of Grand Seiko, and really Seiko in general, is generally the bracelet. The bracelet is made out of the same hardened grade 5 titanium that the rest of the watch is made out of, and sports brushed links with really nice polished center links. And it has an engraved clasp with Grand Seiko's logo as well. So it's very nicely executed. But a lot of people just don't love Seiko's, and especially Grand Seiko's bracelets, because they just feel a little cheap. They feel a little flimsy. This is definitely not flimsy. I mean, there's no bend in it at all when I hold it like this. So you can see it's really well made. It's integrated into the case well. It has the spring bar openings on the back. But just a lot of people don't love the feeling, and I can sort of agree with them, right? Because it doesn't feel like a bracelet for a $5,000 watch or a $10,000 watch. It feels like a $100 watch bracelet, which is really unfortunate because I think they do such a good job everywhere else, but I just don't think they carry it over to the bracelet. And maybe it's our fault too, though, because, I think the rest of the watch really exceeds any expectations for a $5,000 watch. And then the bracelet is just average for that price point. So in reality, would I pay an extra $1,000 for a nicer bracelet? Probably not, but maybe I would. But do I think any bracelet at any price point would be able to live up to the same expectations of the rest of this watch? I don't think so, right? I think, the dial, the rest of the watch is made up to like a $15,000 standard, and it's just really hard to quantify how a polished bracelet would be able to live up to that standard for the price point that we're at. Turning to the bezel, where I look at, the indices, rotation action, and scales, obviously this doesn't have a bezel, but I actually think that's an important design element here. I really enjoy the Taisetsu's design, which really stretches this box crystal really far over to the edges of the side of the watch, which kind of creates this portal look where you can view the textured dial from almost any angle. As you can see here, I can turn it around and you can just see from every angle into the watch. And it really creates this really nice viewing ability that I think is good for this dial in particular. I don't think this dial needs a rotating diverge bezel. I just think it would look stupid. And lastly, looking at the originality of the watch, while Grand Seiko may not have the same timeless history as some other storied watchmakers, some of which are older than many countries, Grand Seiko has historical pieces to inspire its current offerings. The Taisetsu is mainly inspired by the 62GS case, which is the case design here. And it was originally released actually back in 1967 as Grand Seiko's first automatic watch. Fast forward to the Grand Seiko I'm holding in my hands today, And you can still see that the design cues from the 62GS are almost identical back to where it was, right? That includes the angles of this case and the lugs, the razor sharp hands, and the lion logo on the back of this exhibition case back that you can see is stamped onto the inside of the glass. Those are all very, very specific design elements that were present back in 1967 that they're still doing. So I think, the Taisetsu builds on the legacy of the 62GS case, but then goes even further by incorporating Grand Seiko's modern and unmatched, to be honest, spring drive movement, power reserve indicator, and the textured dial now, which obviously they weren't doing back in 1967. Turning to the construction of the watch, I gave this 21.5 points out of 25 points. I think starting with the overall quality, there's no denying that Grand Seiko is synonymous with quality. Any serious collector will gush about Grand Seiko's quality control, attention to detail, and flawless execution. Even under a 10x loop, which I have some macro shots on my blog, I could not find a single flaw on the dial or any of the indices. Most watches in this price range or even higher price ranges, right? You might see one little speck of dust or a little smudge or an indice that doesn't have a perfectly polished edge. That is not the case with Grand Seiko. Every polished surface is evenly applied, and that includes all of the case sides here, as you can see. The reflection is very, very uniform. I mean, you can watch a movie on this reflection. It is so clear, it is so perfectly balanced and so well done. Turning to the backside, the movement is just so well polished. The polishing is just so uniform. Honestly, it's just shocking that they're able to do this. And I think that's why a lot of serious collectors are always just really impressed by Grand Seiko, because they're able to produce a really well executed watch at a price point that no one else has been able to replicate. In terms of materials that the watch is made out of, as I mentioned earlier, the entire case, including the bracelet, is constructed from hardened grade 5 titanium, which Grand Seiko states is one of the most scratch-resistant materials they can produce. I'm always impressed when a watchmaker can make a titanium watch not impure, industrial looking. The gray metal of titanium, almost automatically exudes a tool-like quality and control. My other titanium watch I have is a Blanc Pan, which is a dive watch. And it's beautiful, but it's very obviously, a tool watch, a dive watch. And so I think the way that they made this watch, which has such a delicate dial and design, to still be made out of titanium and just really create this aesthetic of this cool gray overall look to it, is just really, really great. In terms of resistances such as water, magnetism, and shock, this Grand Seiko has a screw down crown and it's made out of solid titanium. And so it does boast 100 meters of water resistance, which is plenty for an everyday watch. You jump in the pool, it's going to be fine. So I'm not too worried about it there. And this watch, as I'll get into more details later, is powered by the Grand Seiko proprietary 9R65 spring drive movement, which really means that it boasts two impressive resistances that traditional movements with other types of escapements simply can't match. First, because the spring drive does not have a traditional escapement, it has a synchronous wheel that spins at a really high speed in one direction. It's very highly anti-magnetic. The unique architecture of the gear train and the lack of a traditional escapement also make the watch highly resistant to bumps and shocks. And so for a watch, best known for its attention to detail and artistic dials, the Taisetsu's internal specs are nothing short of impressive, and we'll get to that later on in the review. Moving on to the movement, I gave the movement 23.5 points out of 25 points, which is extremely high for this price range. I think this is really where the watch excels and gains a lot of points over other watches in this price. I could spend the entire 30 minutes reviewing this watch and talking about the Grand Seiko spring drive movement. The movement inside this watch turns everything you know about watch movements and completely rewrites history. The spring drive was born out of an obsession for accuracy, which other commentators have discussed extensively, and I have links to that in my blog, which I don't have to go in too far, and I really won't go into the history too much. But essentially, after the quartz revolution that started in Japan, which really sent the rest of the watch world into chaos for about 2 decades in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Grand Seiko's engineers looked for a way to combine the accuracy of quartz, which was cheaper, with the efficiency of self-winding automatic movements, right? Grand Seiko's engineers were thinking about how do they combine the two things that people like. Accurate watches, but also automatic watches that you throw on your wrist and they're winding themselves and they're keeping themselves powered. What they developed over the course of 4 decades was the spring drive movement, which stores energy via a mainspring barrel, just like any other automatic watch we have, but then distributes that power through a gear train called the tricycron regulator. And that uses the quartz crystal and glide wheel mechanism. So instead of having a fork that goes back and forth on the regulator, it just has a really, really fast moving glide wheel that spins in one direction very, very quickly. And the quartz movement inside is able to read that movement and then accurately tell the time. It's really complex, although other people have taken the complexity of it and really distilled it down easily. And I think if you have some time, you should read more about the spring drive in articles that I linked in my article. And as you can see here, the movement is also just gorgeous, which is crazy. And over here, you can see, I'll try to get it in the shot. If you can see right there, that is the glide wheel. That is just moving right now. You almost can't even see it spinning, but it is moving at extremely high speeds in one direction. And that is what is ultimately regulating the time of this watch. In terms of complications, the Taisetsu's spring drive movement is largely a no-frills, three-hand design with a simple date function located at the 3 o'clock position, which is nice. I do like date windows. I know other people hate them. And I think the best part about this watch, though, is that it does have one additional complication that is both useful and adds to the complicated design and execution of the dial, and that's the power reserve right over here. The power reserve indicator is located in the lower left-hand quadrant of the dial and is decorated with engraved circular grain and polished indices. The spring drive boasts a power reserve of 72 hours, which is fantastic, and that keeps you charged over the weekend. And with the power reserve indicator on the face and not hidden on the backside like some other brands like Breguet, the wearer is instantly able to discern whether the Taisetsu's mechanism is stopped temporarily or is still running, or whether you need to pick it up and hand wind it for a minute or not. So while not technically a complication, I do think another part of the design of this movement is really complicated and needs to be mentioned in any review, and that's the smooth sweeping seconds hand that you see here. Because of the unique architecture of the spring drive movement, like I said, the glide wheel is moving very, very quickly in the back. The second hand here actually doesn't tick. So if you think about most normal watches, they're ticking 8 increments per second. So they're sweeping, but if you slow it down, it sweeps every second. It sweeps 8 very, very small increments of that second. Here, as you can see, the movement is perfectly smooth. There is no ticking there. And that is something that is very unique to the spring drive movement from Grand Seiko. No other watchmaker has a smooth hand like this. Zenith comes close because Zenith has their 1/10 of a second movement. So that is doing 10 ticks per second. And so it looks much smoother than the average watch. But this is just really, really, really cool. And not only is it technologically awesome, but as a design element, it's just really pretty to look at. I've caught myself countless times just like watching the blue, like it's on my wrist, right? And I'm just like watching this blue seconds hand just sweep really, really slowly, over the snowy landscape of the dial. It's just mesmerizing. I mean, I could watch it all day. Just think, again, there is no comparison in the industry for this. So that just really goes to show why Grand Seiko is just a really serious contender for one of the better watchmakers out there. In terms of accuracy, another positive of the spring drive movement is that it is extremely accurate. The 9R65 movement in this watch is particularly accurate because it uses a quartz oscillator vibrating at an insane 32,000 hertz, right? A normal watch ticks at about 4 hertz compared to the spring drive, which is moving at 32,000 hertz. It's extremely accurate. The spring drive is actually able to maintain a plus or minus 1 second per day accuracy, and it's typically less than plus or minus 10 seconds per month. Mine is actually going just at 9 seconds plus a month on average, which is absolutely ridiculous. For most watchmakers, they'd be happy if their watch was 9 seconds a day. This is 9 seconds a month. And for context, the spring drive is actually twice as accurate as Rolex's superlative chronometer, and at less than half the price. So the superlative chronometer is plus or minus 2 seconds. Grand Seiko is plus or minus 1 second. And this is also much more accurate than the standard chronometers tested under the COSC or METAS standards. The Grand Seiko's accuracy is both a feat of engineering and also a testament to the level of quality that Grand Seiko demands of its watches. In terms of power reserve, as I mentioned before, there's 72 hours here, so you don't have to worry about setting the Grand Seiko down overnight or even over the weekend. And I just really think they've put a lot of innovation into this. They've made a lot of innovations to make the spring drive's mechanism transmit power from the traditional mainspring to the quartz oscillator. You have this wheel spinning at 32,000, the oscillator moving at 32,000 hertz. You have this glide wheel just spinning constantly at a high RPM movement, and they're still able to maintain 72 hours of power reserve despite all those complications and all that's movement in this watch. So it's just really, really impressive. And lastly, in terms of the finishing and design of the movement, this thing is just absolutely beautiful in the back here. It's unfortunately covered by that, logo sticker that they insist on putting on Grand Seikos, which a lot of people don't love. But obviously Grand Seiko's attention to detail and excellent finishing techniques aren't just reserved for the case and the dial. The 9R65 movement is highly decorated, and I dare say it might be the most polished and reflective watch movement in my collection by a long shot. This thing reflects light almost as much as the front of the watch does. Look at those Geneva stripes. Viewing the movement through the clear case back, you can see that Grand Seiko clearly puts time and effort into every aspect of this watch. The movement itself is decorated with Grand Seiko's specific version of Geneva stripes, and it has beveled edges and also anglage as well. Usually you see these finishings in a $10,000 plus watch, and Grand Seiko is able to do this for around $5,000. So I think it's really, really cool. This level of decoration is typically reserved for hot horology brands. So seeing it decorating a unique hybrid quartz movement, in a watch that costs a fraction of some of those other watches, like, an A-Lang Song or one of those, it's just really, really impressive. Lastly, turning to the other factors I typically review, I typically look at a couple factors such as the price. So to begin, the Grand Seiko Taisetsu currently retails in the US for $6,600 US, and that reflects several price hikes over the past 2 years. However, if you happen to be in Japan like I was, this watch can be picked up much cheaper based on currency rates. I think it's actually even cheaper now than when I was there, which is a bummer. There's also 0% tax and discounts available at department stores. And so when I was in Japan, I was able to pick this up for under $5,000, brand new from a Grand Seiko boutique, and it just felt like an absolute amazing steal for this watch. Every time I put it on, I'm just amazed at the quality, the lightness, and design. And I can't think of many other watches that have as strong of a value proposition as the Taisetsu, with its crisp dial, titanium case, and the one-of-a-kind spring drive movement as well. In terms of quality control, I gave this obviously 5 out of 5 points. Grand Seiko excels in its attention to detail, and it has attention to detail to the smallest details. Even under a 10x loop, every single curve, edge, bevel, pattern is perfectly uniform. Take, for example, the razor sharp hour and minute hands here that you can see reflecting in the light have brush surfaces and razor sharp edges. While other top-end manufacturers will use finishing techniques that create an almost perfect set of hands, the Taisetsu's sword-like hands are evenly sharpened to a precise point. And honestly, it appears as if either hand could be removed from the watch and used as a scalpel if you had to. The hour markers also prove Grand Seiko's finishing expertise, right? Each one of these has microscopic ridges at the top edge of each of the hour markers that reflect almost like a rainbow coloring that is just unheard of in other watches. I mean, other watches, I have a Blancpain with white gold indices that reflects light really well. I think these are actually even brighter than the white gold. And so that's just really, really cool. It creates this dazzling effect that I think is specific to Grand Seiko. In terms of certifications, which is usually, COSC or METAS, unfortunately, Grand Seiko does not get those distinctions or certifications because it is not made in Switzerland. So the coveted third-party certification process is probably the only area that Grand Seiko as a brand does not excel. While Grand Seiko's spring drive movement is actually more accurate than most other purely automatic movements made by its European counterparts, the movements beating inside each Grand Seiko are not tested or evaluated by COSC, METAS, or any other Swiss-backed certifier. And I think it's a shame that Grand Seiko does not submit its movements to these independent testers, but some of them they just can't. However, I think the spring drive movement is so accurate, COSC's chronometer certification would not even do it justice. I think it would be kind of useless to get this watch COSC certified because it's so accurate. The spring drive's monthly tolerance is just a few seconds more than the COSC's daily tolerance limit. And so I think, that proves Grand Seiko's mastery of the quartz automatic hybrid movement, but also shows that these certifications aren't really necessary here. And so while I wouldn't expect to see chronometer, embellishing the dial of the Grand Seiko anytime soon, I think it would probably be too much for this anyhow. I think maybe Grand Seiko might want to look into inventing their own standards, sort of like JLC's 1,000 hour master control test, which doesn't mean anything other than, JLC's tested it for 1,000 hours. And I think that can give, purchasers just some peace of mind that their watch will work flawlessly. But again, at the price range here, I think that's a very esoteric complaint to have. In terms of the warranty, each Grand Seiko comes standard with a 5-year warranty, which is more or less the industry standard at this point. Given the watch's hybrid movement and Grand Seiko's expert execution of the watch, I would have hoped for a slightly longer warranty period, maybe 7 years. And that's just to symbolize Grand Seiko's confidence in their product. But again, 5 years should be plenty. And lastly, in terms of the presentation, which I started the video with, I think the Grand Seiko's presentation box is a little bit unimpressive, especially compared to other luxury watchmakers in the same price range, such as Omega's lacquered tan wood watch box, which is beautiful. However, purchasing a Grand Seiko, especially in Japan, is exactly what you would expect from a prestigious Japanese brand. The presentation, customer service, and overall shopping experience is just impeccable. The blue presentation box, signed warranty cards, and wrapping paper are prepped diligently. And not only that, but the sales associate takes the time to set the watch's time down to the exact second to ensure that the watch leaves the store as accurate as possible. So I thought that was really cool. He was messing with the watch next to his phone. I was wondering what he was doing, is because he was setting it exactly down to the second of atomic time, which I thought was great. It's impossible to describe how remarkable it is to purchase one of these watches where they are recognized as the pinnacle of watch design in Japan. So if you ever find yourself in Japan and you want to get a watch and you've had this one on your list, just go find a Grand Seiko boutique immediately, get it over with, because you'll be thinking about it the entire time you're in Japan, kind of like I was for the first half of my trip. So yeah, that is the Grand Seiko Taisetsu, one of my most recent purchases and one of my favorite purchases, I think. Again, I gave it 87 points overall, which I think, for the $5,000 I paid for it, and even for the $6,600 that it retails in the US, I think that's a fantastic score for this watch to get. So let me know what you think in the comments, and please like and subscribe to this video for more. I'll have some more reviews coming up shortly. Thanks.